Hello, happy holidays. I am going to do a tarot reading today. Typically, I do a reading every few months or so to kind of get my bearings, but I always try to do one at the end of the year to kind of see what's coming for the new year. And it's approaching the end of 2023, so I am going to do a reading for my 2024. If you like anything you see here, or if you want to subscribe, or you can hit the bell for notifications, go ahead and do that if you want to. It really helps my channel, and I want to see it grow, so that would be awesome if you could do that. I guess I'll start with saying that I'm going to use the Crowley Tarot, created by Aleister Crowley and Lady Frida Harris. And this is by far my my favorite tarot deck. In this video I'm posting up here, you will see my top 10 coolest tarot decks. You're welcome to watch that video if you want to learn more about this deck and also the book that I'm going to be using for my reading. But typically you're supposed to shuffle the cards, which seems pretty obvious. These cards are kind of oversized, so they're a little bit hard to handle, but one reason that I chose these is because of the large images on them. Lady Frida Harris painted all these paintings, and I really love them, so I just like the big images so I can see it better. But I'm going to shuffle while I'm thinking of what I'm going to focus on. This last year I've been trying to do a lot of inner work, let's say, some self-improvement, and it's not easy, as you probably all understand, because I'm sure you're trying to do the same thing. I hope you're trying to do the same thing. So I think for my next year, that's basically going to be my question is, what can I do, or what is coming for me in terms of self-improvement? I'm very interested in Taoism and Stoic philosophy, and I've been trying very hard to get kind of a even Stoic mindset, and it's not always easy. So that is what I'm going to focus on. So I guess, you can kind of focus on consciousness or relationships or financial things. I'm mainly going to focus on my consciousness, I guess. I'm also going to be using the Crowley Tarot Handbook. This is my copy. It's kind of destroyed, but it's written by Hajo Banzahf and Akron, and obviously they use a lot of Crowley's ideas. So I'm going to be using that, and I'm going to be using the Celtic Cross spread, and that looks something like this. So I will deal out the cards now. Before I do that, though, I should mention I don't really like to do this because it creates a lot of glare, but I'm going to have to wear glasses when I read. This is how it works, but especially small print. So I apologize if there's a lot of glare from the computer screens or whatever, but I have to do it. So anyway, here I go. So I need to pick out 10 cards. I'm going to do that now. I always like the way these cards smell, because I used to have them in a box with some incense and stuff, so they smell like that still. Plus they're quite old, so they have that kind of old musty smell as well. So let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 so far. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I will set the other cards aside, and I will put them in the Celtic Cross now. Okay, so the Celtic Cross spread is kind of all-purpose spread, and it's probably the best known of all of the different tarot spreads. And as you can see, I don't know if what is in here looks all that promising. Looks kind of like a lot of upheaval maybe, but we're going to go in deeper into that and sort through it. So the first card is the Knight of Wands. Okay, the Knight of Wands is the father of the creative imagination. It's expansion and vastness. So this is it. This is the problem or situation. In terms of consciousness, the Knight of Wands is the image of a god. The Father projected outwards may be consoling and helpful to us, but it involves us in our own concepts because the ego much rather prefers to strive for its own divinity instead of super-personal values. It's kind of the I want, or it wants within me, or I am being wanted. This is not just a matter of expressing concepts, of ideals or personal will, but rather also of encountering one's own insignificance. This king is an expression of great maturity, requiring that we also become conscious of those aspects within us which are embarrassing, or of which we are ashamed. Okay, that doesn't sound good. Yeah. What I see here is I see that maybe I am going to fail in some way that is going to help me become more mature. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I'm quite ready for that. Obviously the last few years, the last year, we've kind of come out of COVID, but before that, we were in COVID, so that was a very challenging time as well. So I'm curious of how this works out for me. It's a fire card, so fire is more about like the intellect and stuff. I think this is going to be a thing about, courage to face life and determination to kind of overcome my weaknesses. That's what I'm reading here, which I've been trying to do already. So maybe, this card is exactly where I am, but I am trying to focus more on getting out of South Korea because I live in South Korea, and I'm trying to figure out what steps I need to take to do that. It's easy to just go back to the USA, but I'd like to go back in a situation where I'm more in charge of my destiny instead of kind of at the mercy of the US system, if that makes sense. I think the goal here, it says, is the utilization of the individual potential. So it's mainly about striving and to not overestimate my own abilities. So that's the problem. Card number 2, this is the one that crosses it, is the Knight of Swords. Another knight, which is interesting. So when it says this crosses it, this means it's kind of like either the barrier or the part where you have to overcome something to resolve the significator card. So in ancient times, Hermes Mercury was not only portrayed as the god of thieves and merchants or traders, but also as a mediator between the Olympic and earthly worlds. His homeland is that of quick thought and comprehension of correlations at the speed of lightning. He is comfortable in contradictions because in each case, every reality is the only result of intellectual concepts as far as he is concerned. Well, those that watch my channel probably already know that Hermes is kind of the magician. So that's interesting that this is coming up. Again, this is someone that masters their abilities, the abilities of the human mind, like no other, like a philosopher, a mathematician, an author, and a person who unreliably changes his viewpoint, his sharp mind recognizing no truth, but smugly twisting it with masterly, sometimes brilliant word games until there are only fragments remaining of the original perception, like a reporter, a lawyer, rhetorician, critic, or diplomat. In this sense, he is related to the mythological figure of Odysseus, who violates all principles when it appears necessary to him in order to achieve his goals. Okay, so this is interesting too, because one of the things I've been kind of trying to do in my life is get out of this kind of people-pleasing aspect, because a lot of times I will go out of my way to try to help people or just help those around me at my own expense, and I think it's a weakness, actually. Just giving is not a weakness, but I think part of me, my ego, wants to give to get some kind of validation or something. So I'm trying to kind of overcome that. And I think that's probably what this is about. For card number 3, this is the one that crowns it. This is the card that's kind of on top. This is what is recognized. You could say this is what is conscious. And for one thing, actually, this is a good card in my opinion, although it can go both ways, I guess. This is the Two of Discs, which is change. Crowley calls it change. That's one thing about Crowley's deck, is he gives it these kind of other names often for the different cards, which I kind of like, because it makes it a little more apparent what you're getting into at first glance. And as you can tell, it's kind of got this Ouroboros yin-yang thing going on, which perfectly sums that up, I'd say. So the Two of Discs represents change and the power of opposites, polarization. Energetically, the snake-shaped 8 depicts the eternal alternation of opposites and thereby a condition of constant fluctuation and change. The still undivided elemental force of the ace has been polarized in the 2. 2 discs mean a turn of events, change, variation, upheaval, revolution, transition, and diversity. The ace shows the material as the condensed form of the emotions that appears in the symbol of gold. This archetypal feeling is separated in 2, whereby change and variation occur. Even if the Taoist emblem, yin and yang, indicates that the opposites are only the manifested impressions, Jupiter, of a single, in itself, unchangeable archetype, which is Saturn. So this card means like changes that happen on their own. It's the 2 ends of polarization. I think on the conscious level, this is kind of showing that there's sort of 2 sides fighting within me, and I definitely think that's been the case. I'm a bit of a searcher and kind of seeker, so I've always been attracted to learning new things, and at certain phases of my life this was a more conservative seeking. In other stages it was a more liberal, let's say, seeking. And I don't mean those 2 words in politics. I mean them more in my attitude towards experience. So I think the last few years I've been kind of torn between those 2 things. I think inside of me there's a wild quality, I guess, but I'm trying to rein that in and have more focus and more control over my emotions and also my behavior in general. But that wild side definitely fights with my more intellectual conservative side. So I think this card is kind of representing that. Yeah, I think it's just the Ouroboros and the snake eating its own tail and the duality of the universe, and we are all at the mercy of that, I guess. So yeah, I think that's what it is consciously. So to me, this is saying something about material, money. Maybe I need to focus more on that, which makes sense if I want to try to get out of Korea. Moving across the world takes a lot of capital. I feel like maybe that's kind of like the floodgates opening up, and some kind of power, success, the magic of money may happen. That would be nice. So that's my conscious life. And then when we go to card 4, which is what it rests upon, This is kind of the subconscious. And we have the Two of Wands. So more fire. A lot of fire in this so far, I guess. I like fire because it's kind of quick action and combustible. So the Two of Wands. The Two of Wands encourages us to deal with the theme of violence, which has not just been outlawed in our times, but was also illegal for the Olympians. The double symbolism of the card described at the beginning graphically shows that also in the spontaneously inflaming and discharging violence, there can be a beneficial aspect, which we certainly cannot do justice to through the suppression of taboos. So this is kind of like the creative will, conquest, and rulership. We can feel ourselves being intensely challenged by the spirit of this card. In order to get rid of pent-up aggressions, we are quickly prepared to get into disputes with everyone. It's saying down here that considering relationships, it's the behavior that expresses, hey, here I come, wanting with conviction to take what no one can give, which is everything. With the perspective of this card, we see only our own assertive will and the desire to conquer. Even if we make an effort on the behalf of the other, we usually do this in the false belief that the other person sees the world just as we do. This corresponds to the idealistic egotist who can only perceive himself in everything. Great. So again, I mean, this is the subconscious, so this is probably this is, my ego, and it's the flames of the will. So impulse and courage to take action. So it sounds like there's going to be quite a lot of activity. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not certain, but that's part of the thing I have to do with the Knight of Wands, with the Significator card, is I have to find a way to harness that subconscious through the card of change, which was the conscious. Yeah, we'll see about that. Card number 5, and this is what came before. This is what led us here. And this is the Priestess, very mysterious card that I've had many times. Sometimes it's called the High Priestess in other decks. In Crowley's, he just calls it the Priestess. On the card, anyway. In the book, it says High Priestess, but in the card, it says Priestess. Now, this is quite complicated because it's one of the major arcana. And I'm not going to get into all of this, but I'll put it on the screen if you want to read through it. I'm going to focus mostly on the interpretations. This card is a symbol of that other reality waiting behind a waking consciousness, normally encountered only in dreams. It is a spiral staircase leading us deeper and deeper back to those nameless primordial experiences that we have collected in millions of years. I'd say that's true. This is the wisdom of the womb. It rules over the unconscious and the intuitive powers. Her world is that of lunar wisdom and whispers, I would say. She is the dark sister. It's a time in which we focus our attention on the unconscious and the images of the soul and give ourselves over to the creative fantasies and dreams. I should say that years ago I did a reading and I had a similar situation with the High Priestess, and I went through a very, very volatile but also enlightening time where I was really, really in tune with my subconscious, and it was actually a bit scary because I was making a lot of art then, and kind of like bringing things out from the ether through the art, which was quite difficult to deal with. Yeah, so that was a very kind of destructive time, but also a very creative time, and also a time that propelled me into a high point in my life. So I'm wondering if this is going to be a similar situation. And I definitely think I've gone through this to some degree in the past year. I've been doing a lot of reflection and trying to come to terms with some of my weaknesses. And a lot of it has been kind of through synchronicities and dreams and things like that. So, I mean, one thing I think I want to try to master is my emotions, and that's not always easy to do, especially in certain situations. high stress situations, or if you're having a drink or something else, maybe your emotions aren't always in check. Based on the cards I've gotten so far, I think that's where I'm headed, is to try to master these, or maybe master is the wrong word. Maybe get more detached from them and be more in the moment and recognize them as only emotions and not really me. Emotions kind of come and go, but our intellect can step back from them, I think. Okay, so for card 6, that is what comes afterwards. So this is sort of the next step. It's how it continues, and this is disappointment. The 5 of Cups, not a good card. And I'll be honest with you, I think the last probably 3 years straight have been pretty disappointing. Not just disappointing in terms of my outlook on the world and what I see happening in the world, with politics and big corporations placing a lot of people in danger, in my opinion. But people that I love. Disappointment can be a double-edged sword. It can be pain and disenchantment, but it can also sober you up, I think. So maybe it's not all bad. It's the connection with the archetypal feminine has been lost, and the once fertile female power has become infertile. The exhausted wellspring shows the hardening of the inner emotional world, and the water that has seeped away represents the decline. This is the fulfillment of unconscious negative wishes, and it's kind of destructive. It's very kind of swampy. It actually is, I think, closely connected to the debauch card, which is my 9th card, but I'll get to that in a minute. This stands for disappointment and pain in the face of a failed project. It can mean that we do not pass an examination, or application is rejected, our business negotiations in which we have placed high hopes end as a loss. It represents disappointment, depression, and despair. Old wounds that often go back to childhood days burst open, and the stale patterns of suffering we believe to have long overcome are awakened. The springs dry up and the feelings are shattered. Yep, this does not sound good. I'm choosing to look at it in a positive light, but so far this isn't looking too hopeful. It's kind of a card of stagnation and bitterness and desolation, remaining in the crisis. So that's kind of the next step. So we'll see where that goes, I guess. Now keep in mind when it says that this is what comes afterwards, I mean, this literally could be tomorrow. It might not be the next year. It could be January, or the earlier part of the year. I don't know. I mean, it could also be the whole year. Hopefully it's not, but it could be. Now we get into the straight part of the spread, and this is kind of where I think a lot of the actual, if you want to call it fortune telling, comes into play, but I don't really believe that the tarot is a fortune telling tool. I believe that it's a tool to understand your emotions and phases in life, archetypal phases in life, let's say. So for number 7, this is how the asker sees it. So this is how I see it. And I see it as oppression, the 10 of Wands. Another kind of negative card. Okay, the 10 of Wands indicates oppression and limitation. The spiritual bonfire has been extinguished, for the sun has landed on the ground of matter after the confrontation with its shadow, Saturn. Saturn is the personification of the old ego that has been worn down between the living power of the unconscious, the moon, and consciousness, the sun, now declaring rigid security to be the principle. Since the assertive drive of the fire has not disappeared in the process, but has instead only been reversed under the dictate of the earthly prevention, the Saturn principle. The energy turns against us and blocks the process of development. Okay, this is quite interesting for me because lately, actually my last book I was working on, Saturn plays a big part in it, and you can check out a video on it there if you are interested. But particularly the cube of Saturn and the kind of cult of Saturn that is around the world. This is interesting for me, I think. Kind of hard to articulate because I can't just explain the whole book in this video, but a lot of the things that I went through in writing the book, I think really connect to this card. On the inner level, we are oppressed by intense worries, apparently external in their origin, without seeing our emotional problems behind them. In such times, it is necessary to get things into proper perspective in order to recognize these entanglements and learn to resolve them in a positive manner, instead of wanting to overcome them in the form of external reflections. This is a struggle for success and power, resulting in stress and overstrain through excessive duties and responsibilities. It's a stiffening of the situation. Yeah, I mean, I think this is pretty much spot on. I'll be honest, in the last 20 years or so, I've been actively writing and publishing, and I mean, I've had some success. I mean, I should feel more satisfied with it because I have made some money and I have actually published things with a press and also on my own. And so I should feel satisfied, but when you put so much time into something, I think at a certain point you want to see some kind of reward or dividends in that way. And for the amount of time I put into all these things, it really hasn't paid itself back, let's say. And you know, the first 10 years of doing it, I was quite hopeful still. But I have to admit, now I'm getting to the point where it's kind of like beating a dead horse a little bit. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that I'm going to give up or anything like that, but I think for a while I was trying to focus on it as a career and as a source of income, a steady source of income, which in some ways I think would influence what I would work on next, or you know, where I was going with my projects. But now I want to just focus on what I want to focus on, and if I don't make any money, whatever, I kind of want to let go of that. So this card, I think, is quite important because in the world we live in, it's ruled by Saturn, basically. If you look around, if you know anything about Saturn, I might do a video on that later, but it's a kind of a big subject, so it might be hard to get into. So I might do that later. So if I do, look out for that. But suffice to say, I think this is mainly about the burden of sort of financial life, or succeeding in the monetary world, basically, the material world. I will say I think my skills are more in the subconscious world, so it's not always easy to be in the material world for someone like me, I think. But, you know, you have to do it to live, so there it is. For the 8th card, this is where it takes place, and this is kind of how others see it, or where it ends up happening. And, well, here's a little bit of positivity, maybe, wealth. And that's the 10 of discs. The thing with the tarot is these cards can often be misleading, so I'm not going to get my hopes up too much. So the 10 of discs is the power of affluence. It represents the material results of the creative impulse that began in the Ace of Wands, and the 10 coins symbolize the values of the human being on the path to fulfillment, for they are the creative energies condensed into material form. Corresponds to our emotional sensibility, recognizing the inner creative nature in external treasures. It is only when we sense that we are part of the infinite perfect spirit and that everything that has been created exists in perfection without our help that we have freed ourselves from having for the sake of having, in favor of inner abundance. Wow, that's actually really interesting. I've really been focused on this idea of abundance. And if you want to check out my video on self-improvement, you'll see kind of what I'm talking about in this case, the idea between scarcity and abundance. And I think for a long time I've had a scarcity mindset. Part of that has to do with my childhood and stuff, but I think I'm starting to finally get a handle on how to live in an abundant mindset. So maybe that will lead to more, not necessarily material wealth, but just inner wealth. This also means that you can gain something in the routine of everyday working life through a changed attentiveness by experiencing it as a source of inner enrichment. This is the Gurdjieff method. And I would say also this guy also talks a lot about that. So it's job security, worthwhile objectives, favorable transactions. The abundance of this card speaks of a lovely time when many facets of your relationships are experienced joyfully. Okay, so that's a good sign. That's positive. Which brings me to card number 9, and that's the one I mentioned earlier, Debauch, which is the 7 of Cups. Uh-oh. I've also gotten this card in the past during a time where there was a lot of debauchery, so this concerns me a little bit. Debauchery can be fun, but it can also cause a lot of wreckage in your life, and I'm not really in the mood to do that, so I'm not sure how to take this card. Yeah, if you look at the card, it's the Water of Delusion. This is when I said the swamp. It's very swampy. It embodies the unconscious longing to become a baby again, or the infantile striving to immerse oneself in the swamps of the depths. The human striving for the original source corresponds to longing for boundless bliss as it is received by the newborn child in the arms of the mother. Shows us the dangers lurking in a careless or falsely understood grappling with the powers of the unconscious. So-called consciousness expanding intoxication is often nothing other than a fearful flight from the world in an attempt to avoid life, the so-called search for transcendental experience. It's building castles in the air, run after illusions, and fall into a dangerous phase of effusive delusions and uncritical seductibility. Okay, now I'm going to say this now that I'm actually very relieved I got this card. And this is one of the powers of the tarot, is that now that I see this, it's almost like a signpost, and I can try to use my willpower, my will, to ride this as it unfurls, let's say. One piece of hope it says here is that it's high time to leave a poisoned atmosphere, become sincere, and create a stable emotional basis. And I will admit that Korea is a strange place. There are a lot of great things about Korea, but there's also a lot of difficult things about living here. And I will say that I think in some ways it's felt a little bit like quicksand here sometimes. Like it's hard to get out. You know, sometimes when you want to go into a new phase of your life, you kind of have to kick everything out of the way to get to that next spot. And I think maybe that's what this is about, the spread. And, you know, sometimes that doesn't always, it puts strain on certain relationships or, you know, different things in your life, different friendships or, you know, different things because you need to kind of break free. So that's how I'm kind of reading this whole spread now at this point. And the last one, now this is definitely negative, is futility, and that is the 7 of Swords, and this is where everything leads. It characterizes our thinking that fails on the basis of our own feelings. This is the impotence of the mind in view of the soul's unconscious prevention mechanism and the related self-pity. If a person becomes a slave to it and spends his time forcing goals that stubbornly refuse to materialize, he will accomplish nothing. However, if a person can accept a certain measure of involuntary disappointment as a necessary consequence of this card, it will impart to him courage, shrewdness, ingenious and quick reactions to the surrounding environment, as well as superiority through surprise maneuvers. It shows that we refuse to believe in certain perceptions and shrink away from conflicts. In such a situation, it is possible that we try to get the better of others or trick them. Usually, however, we direct the insincerity at ourselves, preventing deep insights or turning them into the crass lies of life. It can mean that we're in danger of being deceived or cheated, or that we ourselves try to do business and get the advantage through dubious methods. It's a seductive artfulness to the passive victim attitude, from minor baseness like malicious glee and insincerity to crude lies and offensive fraud. It can also be a warning indication that instead of solving problems, we beat around the bush and are therefore in danger of getting off the path we have chosen. Yeah, I'm very actually relieved that I've done this, this spread for the new year, because it's always good to go into something and have some kind of intel, let's say. And I think now I have a lot of intel, and I can act accordingly. It's much better than being caught off guard and not being prepared. Now, some people might say, well, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now I'm going to go do all this stuff or have this kind of trajectory, let's say. Well, I don't really see it that way. I see it as I have kind of a map now, and I can use that to more efficiently navigate these dangers, let's say. And I think that is quite useful. And, usually when I have a spread like this, I'll take a photo of it and I kind of refer back to it occasionally to kind of refresh my memory on it. All in all, I think it's quite positive. It doesn't seem like it is compared, looking at all the cards, but it shows that the things I've been thinking about over the past few years, I think are finally going to come to a head. And that's good, because that's kind of like the infection bursting, or the almost like a volcano. You got to have the release, and this kind of sounds like this is what's going to happen. Now, it might be destructive and it might be bad in terms of relationships around me or this or that, but I think all in all, it's going to be good for me, and hopefully what's good for me will also be good for others. I think any time that we have self-improvement, we can inadvertently help others around us by trying to be an example. So if I can still the waters, let's say, of the emotions, is kind of what I'm getting from this spread, maybe by able to achieve that, if I can, maybe that can help other people. So I think that's my reading. If you want to ask me any other questions about the tarot, you're welcome to do that in the comments. I will put a link to the book in the description that I used. It's an invaluable book. I highly recommend it. If you have any questions about the spread and you want me to clarify anything, I can try to do that as best to my ability. I think most people think of tarot reading as fortune telling, and I really don't think that's what it is. And if you've watched this to the end, you can kind of see that this was more of a internal assessment of where I'm at and where I'm going. And I don't think that has anything to do with, how many babies you're going to have, or that kind of thing. It's more a subconscious examination, let's say. So yeah, you can like and subscribe if you liked what you see here. Hit the bell, and I think that's about it. Happy New Year, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.